Grand Portage Resources' Herbert Gold Project in southeast Alaska highlights increased gold resource, indicated and inferred, of 860,000 ounces, in excess of 10 grams per ton gold. Expansion drilling is planned on the Herbert Gold property for the summer of 2019. Grand Portage Resources trading symbols are GPG on the TSX Venture, GPTRF on the OTCQB, and GPB on Frankfurt. For more information, please visit our website, grandportage.com.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Kris Sims, BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Welcome back to the show, Kris.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Kris, the boss of TransLink, the transit authority for Greater Vancouver, has just got a whopping pay raise. How much money is he going to make, and how does he compare to other transit bosses around North America?
Well, we've got bad news and good news here. The bad news, the transit head already makes $410,000 per year, plus a pension contribution of more than $40,000. And again, that's just one of the heads of this TransLink board. That's just the CEO. If you run down their list, there's other people who are very well paid amongst that brass at TransLink. So that's the bad news. This tiny silver lining, good-ish news here is that it's a pay range approval, and so far they haven't yet put through the actual increase. So we have time. We have time to pick up the phone. We have time to send our emails. We have time to push back and tell TransLink to not approve these salary increases. The worst part of the news is this new salary range that they've given the green light to would pay him up to $517,000 per year, plus pension. So over $500,000 to run a regional bus board. That is far and away more money than we pay the Prime Minister of Canada and higher than the Premier of BC. It's almost those two salaries combined to run TransLink. So this is where we're saying this has got to stop. This is crazy. This is completely taxpayer funded and funded by those who use transit. And look at what happened on July 1st. They jacked up the TransLink gas tax, and they jacked up TransLink's ridership rates if you're buying your pass for SkyTrain or jumping on the bus. And they said, oh, it's all about service. And lo and behold, they're looking at jacking up CEOs' salaries. This is unacceptable.
Who approves these salary hikes?
The TransLink board. So it's up to the TransLink board to decide who gets a raise in salary, and then it will be passed through. So there's 11 different people that sit on that TransLink board. Their next board meeting is September 25th. You can apply to speak at it, and you can also send emails to the 11 board members that sit on TransLink.
Are these board members elected?
Some of them are elected. Some of them are mayors, for example. Others are simply appointed because they, come from different fields, often from academic fields or city planning fields. And I need to check to see how much they're paid per meeting. I've been told that keep in mind there's also the Mayor's Council for the TransLink board. So there's board after board when it comes to TransLink. They have a big shiny tower there that they fill full of people that we pay. And I know that, for example, the TransLink Mayor's Board are paid a lot of money. I've heard that it's hundreds of dollars per meeting. I actually have a Freedom of Information request out there right now to find out exactly how much board members are paid to sit in on these TransLink board meetings.
Do they approve their own salaries?
See, this is the catch. They say that this was a third party that they farmed this out to for the salary review. And when you listen to their spin, a lot of which wound up in the newspapers this morning, they say, we haven't done a salary review in 4 years, as if people have been, starving at the bottom rung of wages at TransLink's board now, which is preposterous. And it was high time for a salary review, and a third party looked at it. But then you need to start wondering, well, are these people really a third party, or do they all run in the same circles? And for us, usually the answer is they all run in the same circles. They're all part of the set and the class who do city planning, who are in city politics, who work in the academic realm of civic politics. They're all the same set. So it's tough to see the daylight between them.
Well, it's like all the major company CEOs get together every year to decide what kind of compensation they're due. Yes,
exactly. It would be exactly the same thing. And so then you wind up stuck with the bill. And for folks who say, oh, well, look at the CEO of, let's be silly, Apple or something, that's different. TransLink is not a widget seller that people can freely choose to go patronize and buy things from with their own hard-earned money. A private corporation CEO is different because he or she answers to their customers, to the market, and to their shareholders. TransLink is funded by taxpayers, ratepayers, and bus riders. This is not just some magical porridge pot that keeps spewing out money to pay them. So the comparison to the private sector doesn't wash. Also, we need to stress, even if they want to look at other transit bosses, and frankly, a lot of other transit bosses in other cities are overpaid. Just because one city is jumping off a fiscal cliff and overpaying their transit bosses doesn't mean we'd need to. And a lot of these analysts will use fancy words like, oh, we need to look at benchmarks. All that means is they look left and right and see what the other guy or other gal is being paid, and they want to keep up with the Joneses, with your money. When you're talking about your money, that's not acceptable. There needs to be a sense of responsibility and frugality when we're dealing with taxpayers' money. It's not the same as the private sector. And I will point out, the New York City transit boss makes less money than this TransLink boss would make if even a middle range salary increase were approved. So even if they didn't give him the full top out of the salary range that's been approved now, the TransLink boss would make more than the New York City transit boss. New York City moves 7 million people per day. Anybody who's used their transit system would be astounded at it. TransLink, 500,000 people per day. You can't even compare the two.
Well, shouldn't the salary then be at least rated to the transportation of the passengers rather than some nebulous figure grabbed out of a very, I would say, spurious SkyTrain use?
Great question. So there's different ways we could go about this. I think for starters, we should look at all of these heads of these different groups, especially something as rudimentary and utilitarian as mass public transit should be. This shouldn't be a bunch of bells and whistles and shiny things. You're getting people to and from work, to and from school, to and from the doctors, and you're supposed to do it efficiently and on time. It shouldn't be a miraculous experience jumping on the SkyTrain. So maybe we could start with this simple benchmark, if they like that word. Let's pay them the same or less than the premier of the province. How is that? Because the premier of the province is a CEO in many ways, and they're in charge of billions of dollars and thousands of jobs. So let's start there.
We'll have more with Kris Sims right after the break.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Kris Sims. Kris, some people are highly critical of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's latest travels because the day after he declares a climate emergency, whatever that is, he is now jet-setting across the country, re-announcing things that were announced a year ago, 2 years ago. It seems like it's all a preamble to the election, which would make this a political expense, not a taxpayer's expense. Yet that's what he's doing, and he won't even tell us what it's going to cost us for all these trips.
Well, this is a threefold problem. Number one, other prime ministers do this too. It happens, unfortunately, across party lines. So no matter which party you're with, in the lead up to an election, if you're doing a whistle-stop tour across Canada promoting what your government has already done over the past, say, 3 3/4 years, guess what you're doing? You're campaigning. You shouldn't be doing that on taxpayers' money. The issue is that it's sometimes difficult to nail them down and tweeze it out and say, this is the actual government work and this is your party politics, because unfortunately sometimes that line gets blurred. The second issue here is that he's not being accountable. So taxpayers deserve to know every single nickel a politician spends. We don't care if it's thousands of dollars on a fake lake or $16 for a glass of orange juice. If you can defend it and say it's justified, that's fine. Just be transparent with it. If you're transparent with it, most people will say, oh, well, you can't exactly walk around a major city like London while you're busy visiting there. You need a cab fare. Most people are reasonable. However, if you, number one, refuse to say how much it costs, and then number two, start obviously hopscotching and jet-setting around the country after declaring a climate emergency, then people get very cynical. And that's the third problem. If you're going to declare a climate emergency, and by emergency, that usually means immediate action is needed to remediate a danger or a risk, meaning stop the car, hit the brakes, stop, drop, and roll because you're on fire. That's an emergency. They declared a climate emergency and then boarded a jet. So this is where people start saying, well, what exactly are you talking about? And this is where politics comes into it. If they truly feel that we're in the midst of an emergency, a looming catastrophe, they better start teleconferencing, Skyping, and taking drastic action to reduce their own carbon footprint. But they're not. They're telling us to do as they say, not as they do. So this entire thing just stinks to high heaven.
And I know it costs a lot. When they hold one of those news conferences out in the middle of nowhere instead of a hotel conference room or a government office, it costs thousands of dollars to bring out all those amplifiers, speakers, microphones, spotlights, cameras, podiums, tables, chairs, the staff to set it up, the staff to take it down. And usually, again, as you said, it's a re-announcement of something they said a year ago, but now the shovel has actually hit the ground, or we've bought the shovel.
Yes, exactly. So that does cost thousands of dollars. You described it perfectly. I've actually, been part of the team before that's had to go do a site survey and make sure that everything is safe and, the weather is decent and, people won't get it, inconvenienced too much by your existence, all those sorts of things. I've done it both for media, for national live television, and for ministers, for politicians. And it does cost thousands of dollars. You need to run sometimes a generator. You need to cable out from an electrical source. You need to build a platform. You need to get there. You need to rent vehicles. You need to pay people. This all costs thousands of dollars. And even often you're printing off those different signs and making new pop-ups. All of those things add up. And some folks will say, oh, well, there's only a couple $100 or there's only $500. Well, you add up a whole bunch of those and taxpayers wind up being out tens of thousands of dollars. And that's not fair. And so that's where we need more scrutiny and more accountability to have a real dividing line between what is party politics and electioneering, which is fine. They just need to fundraise themselves and pay for what they want to pay as the Liberal Party of Canada, and what you're doing as a form of government. And again, this goes across party lines.
Well, they always seem so fond of pretty backdrops. The news conference I remember once is having to go out to Delta to a swamp for some kind of announcement about railways so they could have a railway signal in the background with some pretty trees. But I'm going to set up in a swamp and bring your own power supply and so on. Must have been very expensive. And I asked during the news conference, what did this cost? And they said, well, it's just part of our PR budget. It wouldn't have made any difference.
Right. And see, this is the thing. And you touched on something there that is a big, hidden, wasteful part of government. And it's the use it or lose it mentality. And this happens throughout different levels of bureaucracy, both provincially and especially federally. I've seen it directly federally. And that's where a certain amount of monies are portioned out to different departments and bureaucracies. And within those departments and bureaucracies, they're portioned out to things like you just said, your communications budget or your PR budget or your planning budget or whatever it is. And you're told, here's your chunk of money, here's your pot of taxpayers' gold, you need to use all of it in a calendar year, or we'll claw it back and you'll get less next year. And for a lot of managers, that can make them panic, because then they can start thinking, oh, well, what if I can't pay my people? What if so-and-so retires and I can't replace him or her? Or what if so-and-so needs a moving expense to cover off their move here because I need that expertise in my department, and that does happen. And that way, managers are always fearful of not blowing their entire budget down to the nickel. They're scared of not spending the whole thing. We need to change that mentality so that managers and departments, no matter if it's PR or planning or whatever it is, are rewarded modestly, so it doesn't get out of control, are rewarded for saving money, not punished for saving money, so that if they have extenuating circumstances the following budget year, they can apply for more funding, and they won't get punished for it if they really need it. But so far, this is what leads to crazy spending. Whenever you see these receipts rolling out right before March, they call it March Madness in Ottawa, that's where you'll find tens of thousands of dollars being blown on dumb things like brand new office chairs or TVs that nobody watches or computers that are automatically obsolete. This is what causes it. It's not sexy. It's not nearly as flashy or interesting as an expense account for lunches, but it wastes millions of dollars a year.
Or why don't they give bonuses to deputy ministers for reducing their budgets instead of giving them automatic bonuses no matter how fiscally responsible they are?
Exactly. And that way, it's almost like, what's this strange thing? Merit? Performance pay? Based on how good of a job you're doing? Imagine that. So yeah, that kind of common sense treatment needs to be filtered into government. And everybody will be better for it. Their employees will be happier, taxpayers will be happier, and will get better service. It's a triple win, and they need to do it.
We'll have more with Kris Sims right after this.
Cypress Development Corp is developing a world-class lithium resource in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. The size of the resource makes the Clayton Valley project a premier asset with the potential to impact the future of lithium supply. Cypress Development Corp trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the OTCQB, symbol CYDVF, and on Frankfurt, symbol C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Kris Sims from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Kris, the BC legislature upped its operating budget again by, I think, about $7 million. That may not be the precise figure, but I think it's around there. And they're still not covered by freedom of information legislation that would let us reporters find out, or your organization find out, how are they spending our money, where are they spending our money, why are they spending our money. So far, they're still immune from being examined by the one body that's left to examine this stuff, because the opposition Liberals appear to be wrapped up in spending scandals there, and the NDP don't seem to be all that concerned about finding out about it.
This is a major issue, and to really highlight for your listeners, I'm sure they get it because they're educated on this stuff, but this is what blows a lot of people away. So there's stuff that's already posted on the internet, right? Quite often with ministers or MPs or MLAs, you can go to their website, and in Ottawa it's called proactive disclosure, and it's part of the Accountability Act that was put through various different years. And what that is their expenses, how much they're paid, and then what they're expensing. Some of them are pretty cloudy and you can't read much about it. Other ones are very detailed. You can find out what kind of muffin they build you for every single morning, for example. In BC, at the legislature, MLAs need to quarterly announce their expenses, and it's usually things like flights, hotels, harbor hopper air, that sort of stuff, okay? That's fine. But the folks, getting to your point, the folks in the middle of the House of Commons, so the Speaker, the Sergeant-at-Arms, the Clerk, all the little, kind of staffers that run around in those black and white robes, they don't post their expenses. And if you or I or someone else sent in a request saying, I don't see this on the internet, it's my money, how much did you spend on this? What did you buy last year? They can tell you to go fly a kite. They are not subject to Freedom of Information law. That's crazy. That should have been the case, more than 10 years ago when accountability really washed over Canada. That's our money. We absolutely have every right to know about it. It should be proactively posted on the internet. We shouldn't even need to do a Freedom of Information request. But the fact that we can't even do that is outrageous. And when all of this broke, when Speaker Plekis blew the whistle and said this is all going on, and everybody rallied and said, we need more accountability and transparency, they should have had this legislation passed before the summer break. And the fact that it's not enacted yet is wrong.
What kind of expenses do you think are being covered up? I mean, the famous wood chipper or chopper or whatever it was. I mean, no criminal charges have been laid and somebody said, well, that's good enough. But something doesn't have to be criminal to be unethical.
It doesn't have to be criminal to be unethical. It doesn't have to be criminal to be wrong. I think for most people, my good rule of thumb is, if you're a politician or you work in government and you're thinking of billing the taxpayer for something, okay, no matter what it is, a flight, a stick of gum, a hotel, whatever, picture yourself standing in the lineup at a gas station. Picture yourself buying a lunch or a sandwich or a magazine. Would you turn to the person behind you and say, hey, I'm on the clock, I'm working really hard for you, I'm your public representative, would you buy this for me, please? If the answer is no, you shouldn't be billing that. If the answer is yes, legitimately, I could ask that question and feel good about it, fine. The problem with this report that we all saw that came out of Speaker Plekis was the amount of spending and what they were spending it on. And it isn't just the wood splitter, which, by the way, was a grotesque waste of money. It was everything. There were dozens and dozens of magazine subscriptions, for example, that you and I and my aunt and your neighbor all paid for. Everything from Arizona cycling to British politician magazines, satire magazines from the UK. Why are we paying for this? A tracking device for hiking. If you're out and about and you're, summiting mountain peaks and trying to tell everybody about how great of a mountain biker you are, we paid for that too. We paid for meals. We paid for chocolates. We paid for Bose noise-canceling headphones at $500 a pop. We paid for 2 pairs of those. We paid for thousands and thousands of dollars in Apple products, including really fancy Apple TVs. Why? Why are taxpayers paying for this stuff? Why are we paying more than $1,000 for a brand new camcorder? This is not acceptable. And so I'm worried that when we finally get our FOI legislation passed, which had better be retroactive back years and years, so we'll find more of this stuff. I'm scared that the Plekis report was just the tip of the spending iceberg.
Kris, always a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you so much for caring about BC.
Kris, where can people go if they're concerned about how our politicians are misspending our money?
We would love to hear from you, and we don't care who you vote for or, where your party politics are. This is all of our money. It's your money, and we need to hold these folks to account. Go to our website, taxpayer.com, and there you can actually see ways of pushing back. We explain how to write a really good letter, how to write a letter to the editor, how to even make a phone call to your local elected representative, and to hold him or her to account, because that's the only way we can get change. We'd love to hear from you.
Kris, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
My guest has been Kris Sims, BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. If you have any questions for Kris or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of Howe Street Media Incorporated.